Hello all, James here. So, Chris Jericho seems to be dropping subtle hints here, there and everywhere as of the past few months that he's not only ready to get physical in the ring, but he might also be ready to go from AEW. So, a quick bit of history here. Chris Jericho hasn't appeared on AEW television since I think mid-April of this year. Beforehand, the AEW fans had basically turned on him, pretty much from last year, I think, chanting things like, please retire, and, we don't want to see you anymore. And maybe not, that wasn't a chant, but that was the intent. Anyway, basically getting the Cody Rhodes treatment where the AEW fans had simply grown tired of him for one reason or another. I don't know if it's familiarity breeds contempt, but there could be a few different reasons. A common AEW fan criticism, not helped because Jericho is so synonymous with WWE as well, is that Jericho was working with young talent, but not really getting them over. That's a contentious point, of course, but that's something AEW fans do say. Also, combined with, natural aging, then there's the weight gain over the last few years affecting his performances, as well as being a fixture of the company for so long with so many different groups and so much TV time. And there are also some accusations leveled against him around the same time that fans started turning on him that didn't really go anywhere, but also with all that combined, I guess, the AEW sickos started voicing their displeasure at Jericho's presence. Now, in response to this, Jericho, who apparently had no designs on retiring, completely changed his character, something he's very, very good at doing, of course, to become the learning tree Chris Jericho. This is a total 180 switch where Chris became an overbearing, obnoxious, fake nice to everybody, hi guys, kind of thing, offering career advice where it wasn't needed, all that sort of stuff. It ended up working for a bit, actually, and it became pretty entertaining for a while, and some of the best backstage vignettes and pre-tapes and everything was from the learning tree. But with Big Bill and Brian Keith as his lackeys, for a better word, a few months afterwards, people started losing interest again, and then with that, Chris Jericho lost the Ring of Honor World title in April. I guess that's when it was obvious that Tony Khan wasn't going to get a Ring of Honor TV deal, and that's the reason, I think, that Chris Jericho ended up being the champion, because he was the biggest name that they could reasonably put the belt onto. And the group disbanded, the Learning Tree group disbanded in April, and with that, Jericho disappeared. Now, Jericho did also have a Fozzy tour to perform for the next few months, but from the summer onwards, the Fozzy tour was pretty much done, and Chris had been ready to go, or I believe, at the very least, he made it himself available to be called back, and he was simply not called back to television by Tony Khan, as far as we know. We think that's kind of more or less the answer. Now, Tony does this for a variety of reasons why he, has someone employed and then doesn't use them. But one of the main reasons is he ghosts talent and keeps them home on full pay to run out the clock, basically, on their contract, because they have expressed, or Tony Khan gets the feeling, that they won't be signing with AEW once their deals expire. Now, most promoters would want to get the most out of their money and book outgoing talent by putting over, current talent that are staying, and once again, getting the most value out of that talent. But when one has such a large roster and so much money that profits and losses don't really mean anything, Tony apparently feels he doesn't want to waste the television time on performers who don't want to be there. Now, when pressed on the matter of Jericho's return, Tony Khan was typically non-committal in his response. So I'm going to give you the quote here. Well, Chris Jericho's been here since the very beginning, and I have so much great respect for Chris Jericho. I do really have to say I would love to have Chris Jericho in AEW anytime, Khan said. Keep in mind, he's the boss. You could have him back any time, if he wasn't injured, I guess. Yeah, we absolutely want Chris Jericho back in AEW, and hopefully soon. He's been great with us, and he's been with us since the very first event. The very first AEW World Champion, and Chris is a huge part of the history of AEW, and still in great shape, still a great wrestler. When pressed for a more direct answer, basically it was, I think you should stay tuned. So once again, the usual Tony Khan non-committal response there of positivity, but not really saying anything. Now, it's all a theory when talking about Chris Jericho at this point that there are more signs pointing towards Jericho leaving AEW for WWE once his deal is done. But what may be something of note, but may well be nothing actually, is that Jericho, I think last month, so it would have been October, announced the next Jericho Cruise for November 2026. And interestingly, not a single AEW performer was announced for the initial press release. Now, that might be much of a muchness there, because apparently for the last Jericho Cruise, he also didn't announce any AEW talent until a lot closer to the actual setting sail, I suppose you might say. More likely because, I mean, Tony Khan gets precedent, and I suppose you need to get nearer the time to make sure that, no pay-per-views or, they aren't needed for TV shows or anything like that. Anyway, a couple of days ago, and this is where it gets more interesting, Chris Jericho shared a topless mirror selfie in the gym. You can see there he's lost considerable weight and displaying a six-pack that hasn't been seen on Y2J in quite some time. And I mean, it's impressive for somebody who's 55, but more importantly, the timing seems interesting, as once again, his AEW contract is up next month, so we all believe, and it's not a bad idea to let it be known that he's fighting in fighting trim for any prospective promoters who might be interested. But then the biggest sign occurred on Talk is Jericho, his Talk is Jericho podcast that was released, I believe, yesterday. Now, Jericho made some comments about AEW that weren't very flattering at all while talking to the Dudley Boys about their last ever match. That was TNA Bound For Glory pay-per-view. It was the Dudley Boys' last ever match as a team. Bubba's probably still going to wrestle. Devon's done. He's retiring against the Hardy Boys, which I think the Hardy Boys won. I watched it as well. It was a tables match. Anyway, the comments that Jericho made will surely rankle Tony Khan and AEW, the AEW office, assuming, of course, that it isn't all one giant red herring. So here is the quote from up here. I don't think I've watched a TNA match in ages. If not this decade at all. I was so impressed, Jericho said. Well, first of all, you guys had a match. It wasn't even the match. It was the beginning part before you guys even lock up. It was the end part after it happened. Like that, I'm getting little goosebumps. That's pro wrestling in its ultimate form. That's all that matters, is the emotion and that reaction. That was one thing. Two, that effing crowd looked huge. It looked huge. It was like a WWE level crowd. The place was packed. I was watching this and not saying anything out of school here, but comparing it to watching Dynamite when they were at the ECW Arena, which looked like a Tony Condello taping. Sorry, it did. TNA looked like the second biggest company in the world, and that was amazing. And the presentation was amazing. Now, I'm going to stay on the screen share thing because I want to show you, if I can, a picture from a death tour from, this is actually 2017, so that's kind of what you're looking at here is, two rows of people, I guess, in a community centre, something like that, is what Jericho is comparing it to. We're going to get to a couple more things that he says in this paragraph here, but most importantly, we have to look at the TNA Bound for Glory crowd. So here's just a few snippets with the crane camera. And it does look like an amazing venue, absolutely packed out. They did a really, really good job building this. And it was for this match, not the main event as well. Now, let's compare it to what Jericho said was the ECW Arena, or the 2300 Arena, as it's known now, that AEW and Tony Khan took a residency in a couple of months ago. And this is for Team Taz, and everyone's chanting, thank you, Taz. AEW, right, so the ECW Arena, the 2300 Arena, I've got to say this, right, I'm going to keep it on screen for you. It looks so much smaller when it's being filmed like from a crane cam, but it's sort of like the same direction as where like the old crow's nest used to be. And it's really unflattering to film this building from this angle. And to be honest, even if it wasn't this angle, it still looks smaller. So I'm going to just find out what the capacity is. Hang on. Well, I might feel stupid there because apparently the maximum capacity is 2,300. I thought 2,300 was something to do with the address, but maybe that's just how it is. But per WrestleTix here as well, Arena is set up for 916 seats. So as far as I can tell, the old ECW setup was somewhere between like 1,100 or maybe 1,300, but I think it was just over 1,000 that they would set up and sell out for. But let's have a look at that quote once more again. So watching Dynamite when they're at the ECW Arena looked like a Tony Condello taping. Right, okay. That's obviously, the TNA thing is way more impressive there than the ECW Arena tapings there. But here's the problem: it's not like for like, that quote, that comparison, and I think it's unfair to compare that because here, Bound for Glory is like their biggest pay-per-view, or that'll be their biggest pay-per-view of the year. And we're going to get actually to the capacity and how many people are actually at that building as well in a second. But here is Wrestle Dream. That is AEW's most recent pay-per-view. So there you go. I mean, that's, a far nicer comparison and a far more fair comparison as well. And that's not even, obviously, AEW's biggest pay-per-view of the year. That would be All In, which got over 20,000, but we're going to get to that in a second as well. But once again, it's not a like-for-like comment, and it almost seems that Jericho is being purposely inflammatory here to bury AEW and Tony Khan, because once again, as I say, the comparison is not like-for-like. But just as a little aside, it was announced that it was nearly 7,800 for the capacity of the Bound for Glory event in October, just in fact almost exactly a month ago in Lowell, Massachusetts. But actually the turnstile count was 6,137 and the tickets sold was just over 5.5. Now, I wanted to bring that up because everyone always say, it's like a WWE show kind of thing. I think they just filmed it really, really well, actually, because it looks like it could be 8,000 genuinely, or even more, rather than the 5,500 paid and 6,200 or thereabouts through the turnstile. Now, once again, TNA is not on its own for making up, attendance numbers, because AEW did that for All In most recently, as well as All-Ins of the past as well. The difference between the turnstile count and the announced number always ends up being thousands, it seems. And then there's WWE that just makes up a number for quote-unquote entertainment purposes. They actually used that phrase in, I think, maybe it was like an investor call when someone questioned the actual attendance of some, WrestleManias and SummerSlams and stuff. So WWE has got form for doing this for decades as well. So it's not a criticism of any one particular company for doing what all the rest of them do. But let's go back to Jericho's quote again. Is that it? No, I'm sorry. It's here. He says, TNA looked like the second biggest company in the world, and that was amazing. Once again, you're not comparing like for like with those two. You're comparing like for those two, and there's the AEW show was better attended and looks it as well on the screen. But similarly, in the world, that's kind of unfair to, well, not WWE, because that's obviously the market leader, but that's unfair to AEW, CMLL, AAA, New Japan, etc. I mean, they all exist in 2025, and I suggest TNA, if we're going to talk about, the biggest promotions in the world, they will be below all of those promotions I just named, if maybe above AAA, I don't know. But at least, they're at least 5th or 6th, I think, as far as companies go. But anyway, is this all a red herring from Chris Jericho? It seemed like a fairly harsh criticism, I guess, for somebody who's still actually contracted with AEW. But the thing is, I bring up red herrings because Chris Jericho is really, really good at throwing out red herrings, apart from the whole, do you remember when he came back? It was either 2007 he came back, or the second time with all the codes and stuff, where it was so obviously him, and it said save us in one of the digitized, like, Matrix kind of vignettes. Everyone figured out it was him within, like, a second. But for the most part, he's always good at throwing out red herrings, or making it seem like there's more interest in him, or as much interest in him as there actually is. And the most famous one, if I can find it for you, one sec. Here we go. Is this, I don't know if this was the original one, but it was on his, like, website in, I guess, 2007 that he posted TNA Wrestling, I guess just to see what the reaction would be. And once again, Chris Jericho is, he never went to TNA, of course, he went back to WWE, and aside from the fact that it's great to build momentum and to build interest in his return, but it's also the fact that, hey, well, other companies are interested in me, you better pay me more, or else I'm going to go with them. It's a great tactic. And once again, Jericho is very, very clever. Not only with how he gets himself great deals with wrestling promotions, not that he doesn't deserve it, of course, but he also constantly changes his character as well, which is just as important. He's always fresh. He's always got a new hairstyle, new facial hair, a new t-shirt, new trunks, or working in a t-shirt or whatever it might be, or his presentation, or a nickname. He's always reinventing himself. And aside from the fact that he's also a really, really great politician as well, maybe not the level of a Triple H or a Hulk Hogan or something, but he's one of the best at doing that, to get stuff working out for him, as well as, I'd say, being less selfish than the other two, Hulk Hogan and Triple H, that I just mentioned. So really, with all that being said, should Chris Jericho go to WWE from AEW? And I think, well, if he was smart, then yeah, absolutely he should. Because, one, he'll get a lot more money, even though I'm sure AEW's paying him a lot, treating him very well financially. But he will get a lot more with WWE, who'll probably pay him near enough what I guess they're paying CM Punk, for example. So in my mind, that's something like 4 or 5 million. And then, I was going to say that's assuming he works full-time, but I mean, pretty much nobody works full-time these days. But also, if he stays in AEW, like, when the time he left, he was mired in the mid-card. He is in his mid-50s. He needs a fresh coat of paint. He's tried to get a fresh coat of paint in AEW with the learning tree thing. It lasted a short amount of time, and then the apathy started quickly building again. So really, I mean, just go to a new place and maybe a new version of the Jericho persona, and I think WWE is the right way for him to go. But also, just to once again illustrate how great he is at the timing of these things, is he left WWE in, I think, 2017. If it wasn't 2016, it was 2017. And then he did that huge Japan deal and had that big feud that was basically an independent feud with Kenny Omega, independent and also in New Japan. And then it sort of migrated to the original pre-AEW All-In show in 2018 as well. So once again, he knows how to freshen himself up and his presentation, or simply leave altogether, take a risk, and start with a big bang in a new promotion, and it's always worked out for him pretty much. Now, if he is indeed not John Cena's final opponent at Saturday night's main event, which my feeling is he isn't, I think everyone knows that his contract, or the feeling is his contract is up in December, and Saturday night's main event, John Cena's retirement bout, is on the 13th of December, and it kind of doesn't make sense for him to be the last opponent as well, when John Cena, I think, for the most part, probably has his heart set on putting over somebody new and could really use the win, I guess, and the Intercontinental title as well. But if Jericho came back at the Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia in 2 months' time, keep in mind that he's a very highly recognisable name from the Attitude Era, and the Saudis will pay out the arse for recognisable names from 20, 30 years ago. So that'll be the perfect time, if he doesn't have a moral issue with it, of course, that'll be the perfect time for him to make a debut financially, and as well as everything else. And then a couple more WrestleManias, including another one in Saudi Arabia, which they'll pay him ridiculous money for turning up, I'm sure. A WWE Hall of Fame in a headline spot, and a graceful retirement in his late 50s, I suspect. That's what he's eyeing, and if that's the case, I think it's a no-brainer and the way to go. So, I pose this question to you. Do you think that Jericho is simply with that Talk is Jericho thing pretty much burying AEW and lauding TNA? Do you think that was a red herring to put people off? He's just going to re-sign with AEW? Or do you get the feeling that this is all totally genuine, it's all in the bag, he's going to be in WWE sooner or later? And more importantly, do you think that is the right move for him to make? So, please subscribe. Like this video if you would. I don't know what the hype thing is. Hype it, I guess. I don't think it makes any difference, but if it does, great. But most importantly, please comment, because I want to know how you feel about this matter, and I'll see you for the next video.